What if I told you that most of your suffering isn't caused by the world around you, but by how you react to it? Think about it. How often do you let external events ruin your day, waste time complaining about things you can't change, or chase approval from people who don't even matter? The Stoics believed that a better life isn't about controlling the world. It's about mastering yourself. In this video, we'll break down 8 Stoic don'ts that will help you develop discipline, resilience, and true freedom. By the end, you'll have a practical blueprint for applying ancient wisdom to modern life. Let's begin. Number 1. Don't let external events control your mind. Life is unpredictable. Plans fall apart, people disappoint us, and the world often refuses to bend to our expectations. A modern Stoic understands this and does not allow external events to control their mind. Imagine waking up to the news that your company is downsizing and your job is on the chopping block. The average person might spiral into panic, anger, or self-pity. But a Stoic reminds themselves that they have power over their mind, not outside events, and they realize this is where true strength lies. A man who trains his mind to remain steady amid chaos holds an advantage over those who react emotionally to every external force. It is easy to blame traffic for ruining your morning, to let one rude comment from a stranger fester all day, or to rage against an unfair decision. But what good does that do? The event itself does not harm you. It is your perception of it that creates suffering. The Stoic instead acknowledges the situation and chooses their response. In today's world, this mindset is more critical than ever. Social media constantly bombards us with negative news and controversies, tempting us to react instantly and emotionally. A modern Stoic resists this urge. They remind themselves that no amount of outrage changes the reality of what has happened. Instead, they focus on what they can control: their words, actions, and thoughts. This does not mean apathy or passivity. It means responding with reason rather than impulse. When you let go of the illusion that the world should conform to your desires, you gain peace. Imagine standing in the rain without an umbrella. You can curse the clouds, complain about the weather, or try to blame someone for not warning you. Or you can simply acknowledge that rain is a natural part of life and walk forward, unbothered. The next time something disrupts your plans, ask yourself, do I control this? If not, why let it dictate my emotions? Number 2, don't complain about things you can't change. Complaining is easy. It is the natural reaction when things do not go our way. Yet, a Stoic knows that to waste time complaining is to resist reality itself. If you are distressed by something outside your control, the pain is not from the thing itself, but from your perception of it. And perception is something you can change at any moment. A modern Stoic understands that life is filled with unfairness. Maybe you didn't get the promotion you deserved. Maybe your flight was canceled at the last minute. Maybe someone treated you poorly for no reason at all. The temptation to complain is strong, but to do so achieves nothing. It is a way of placing blame outside yourself, as if the world owes you perfect conditions. But reality is indifferent to your expectations. Take, for example, the coworker who constantly complains about the company they work for. They feel undervalued, they despise their boss, and they make sure everyone around them hears about it. Yet year after year, they stay in the same job, stuck in the same cycle of frustration. What has their complaining accomplished? Nothing has changed, except that they have drained themselves and those around them of energy. A Stoic in their place would see two options: change what they can or accept what they cannot. If they truly hate their job, they would take steps to leave. If leaving isn't an option, they would shift their mindset, choosing to focus on what they can control, doing their best work, setting boundaries, and finding meaning in their own actions. In the modern world, we are surrounded by voices of complaint on social media, in casual conversations, in the news. But a Stoic refuses to add to the noise. Instead of whining about politics, they vote and get involved in their community. Instead of complaining about their health, they adopt better habits. Instead of resenting difficult people, they work on strengthening their own patience and character. Complaining feels good in the moment, but it is a trap. It reinforces a mindset of victimhood, where the world is always against you and you are powerless to change it. But you are not powerless. You may not control events, but you always control how you respond. When faced with a frustrating situation, a Stoic asks, will complaining solve this? If not, they move forward without wasting another breath on it. Number 3, don't be a slave to your desires. Modern life is a battlefield of temptations. Advertisers, social media algorithms, and consumer culture all work tirelessly to convince you that happiness is just one more purchase, one more indulgence, one more dopamine hit away. The Stoic sees this trap for what it is: enslavement. No person is free who is not master of himself. Consider the endless cycle of wanting. You buy the latest phone, and within a year, a newer model is released, making your once cherished device feel outdated. You eat a rich meal, and minutes later, the craving for something sweeter emerges. You scroll through social media, seeking entertainment, only to find yourself restless and dissatisfied moments later. This is not freedom. This is addiction in its subtlest form. A modern Stoic resists this cycle. They understand that every unchecked desire tightens the chains around them, turning them into a puppet controlled by external forces. The solution is not to reject all pleasure, but to discipline oneself, to indulge only when it aligns with virtue, not impulse. When a Stoic craves something, they ask, do I control this desire, or does it control me? Take, for example, a person who constantly seeks validation on social media. They post, refresh, check for likes, and allow their self-worth to rise and fall with each comment. They are not free. A Stoic, by contrast, might use social media as a tool, but remains indifferent to praise or criticism. They do not need external approval because their self-worth comes from within. Desires will always exist. The difference between the free and the enslaved is that the free man chooses which desires to entertain and which to dismiss. He does not let them rule him. Number 4, don't fear discomfort or hardship. Discomfort is the forge of character, yet modern society treats it as something to be avoided at all costs. Air conditioning, instant food delivery, endless entertainment. Everything is designed to eliminate hardship. But a Stoic understands that difficulties strengthen the mind, just as labor strengthens the body. A person who has never faced discomfort is fragile. They panic at the first sign of adversity, crumble under pressure, and complain when things do not go their way. But those who train themselves to endure hardship develop resilience. Imagine an athlete who avoids pain during training. They may be comfortable in the moment, but when it's time to compete, they will be weak. Life is the same way. If you avoid discomfort, you weaken your ability to handle life's inevitable challenges. A modern Stoic embraces voluntary discomfort to prepare for involuntary hardships. They take cold showers to practice discomfort. They fast to remind themselves that hunger is not fatal. They push themselves in their workouts to prove that their body can handle strain. They do not wait for suffering to find them unprepared. Consider a person who loses their job unexpectedly. The one who has spent years in comfort and ease will panic. The one who has trained themselves in hardship will adapt. They will see it as another challenge to overcome rather than a catastrophe. Life will bring pain, loss, and struggle, whether we like it or not. The Stoic does not ask for an easy life, but for the strength to handle a difficult one. Number 5, don't waste time on useless opinions. We live in an era where opinions are thrown around like currency. Social media, news outlets, and casual conversations are flooded with people arguing over everything from politics to celebrity gossip. But a Stoic understands that not every opinion is worth engaging with. It is better to trip with the feet than with the tongue. Consider how much time is wasted on pointless debates. A person sees a comment they disagree with online and spends the next hour angrily typing a response, arguing with strangers who will never change their minds. Another person gets sucked into office gossip, spreading negativity over things that do not concern them. This is not wisdom. This is distraction. A Stoic chooses their battles carefully. When they hear an opinion, they ask, does engaging with this serve a purpose? Does it improve my life or the lives of others? Most of the time, the answer is no. The wise person knows that opinions are like the wind, constantly shifting, uncontrollable, and often meaningless. This does not mean a Stoic avoids all discussions. When a topic is worth addressing, they do so with reason, not emotion. They do not argue to win, but to seek truth. If the conversation is filled with noise rather than wisdom, they walk away. In today's world, this mindset is more valuable than ever. The internet is a breeding ground for outrage, where people waste hours debating topics that will not change their lives in any meaningful way. A Stoic sees this and refuses to be pulled into the chaos. Their time is too valuable to be spent on meaningless noise. The next time you are tempted to engage in a useless argument, pause. Ask yourself, will this conversation improve my life? If not, let it go. True wisdom is knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. Number 6, don't seek validation from others. The need for approval is a silent prison. People shape their lives around the opinions of others, seeking validation through praise, likes, promotions, or status. But a Stoic knows that external approval is fleeting and unreliable. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor. Imagine a man who spends hours curating his online image, carefully selecting photos, crafting captions, and measuring his self-worth by the number of likes he receives. If the engagement is high, he feels successful. If it's low, he questions his value. This is not freedom, this is enslavement. A Stoic does not allow their happiness to be dictated by the judgments of others. They live according to their own values, indifferent to applause or criticism. They understand that seeking external approval is a losing game, because no matter how much validation you receive, it will never be enough. Someone will always disapprove. Some will praise you today and forget you tomorrow. Chasing validation is like chasing the wind. This applies in the workplace, in relationships, and in social settings. Many people make choices not based on what is right, but on what will gain them acceptance. They overwork themselves to impress a boss. They agree with opinions they don't believe in to fit in, or they sacrifice their authenticity to avoid judgment. But a Stoic stands firm. They ask, am I living in accordance with my values? Am I doing what I believe to be right? If the answer is yes, then external validation becomes irrelevant. When you detach from the need for approval, you become unshakable. You do your work with integrity, not for recognition. You speak the truth, not for applause, but because it must be said. You live not for the expectations of others, but for your own internal sense of virtue. And in doing so, you gain something far greater than approval. You gain freedom. Number 7, don't avoid the reality of death. Most people live as if they have endless time. They waste hours scrolling through distractions, putting off meaningful work and avoiding difficult conversations, all while assuming there will always be a tomorrow. But a Stoic knows otherwise. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Memento mori is not a morbid obsession with death. It is a call to live fully. When you remember that life is temporary, you stop wasting it on trivial things. You stop holding grudges because you realize that time is too short for resentment. You stop postponing your dreams because you understand that the perfect moment may never come. You stop taking people for granted because you know that every conversation could be the last. Imagine a man who fears death so much that he avoids thinking about it. He refuses to acknowledge that his time is limited. He distracts himself with entertainment, material possessions, and empty pleasures, hoping to escape the inevitable. But the avoidance of death leads only to an unfulfilled life. He never takes risks, never fully commits to anything, and at the end, he wonders where his time went. A Stoic, on the other hand, embraces the reality of death. They do not fear it because they know it is part of nature. Instead, they use it as motivation. They wake up each day knowing it could be their last, and so they live with intention. They express gratitude, pursue their goals, and focus on what truly matters. When you stop fearing death, you start valuing life. You no longer delay important things because you understand that there is no guarantee of tomorrow. You live with urgency, not in a frantic or anxious way, but with clarity and purpose. You speak honestly, you act decisively, and you cherish the present moment. So ask yourself, if today were your last day, how would you live? Would you argue over petty things? Would you waste time on meaningless distractions? Or would you love more deeply, work with more passion, and appreciate every breath? The answer to that question is the key to living well. Number 8. Don't let others dictate your character. It is easy to be kind when others are kind. It is easy to be honest when others are honest. It is easy to be patient when the world is patient with you. But life is not always so cooperative. People will betray you, insult you, test your limits. And when they do, the true test of character begins. Someone else's mistake is not an excuse for you to act wrongly. Imagine a man who prides himself on being calm and collected until someone cuts him off in traffic. In an instant, he is shouting, cursing, consumed with rage. Or consider the worker who values honesty until they see colleagues lying to get ahead. Rather than holding their ground, they compromise their values, telling themselves that they must play the same game to survive. This is weakness disguised as adaptation. A Stoic does not let the behavior of others dictate their own. They do not become cruel just because the world is cruel. They do not become dishonest just because others are dishonest. They do not allow external circumstances to shake their internal principles. Their character is their own, unmoved by the actions of others. This does not mean being passive or allowing others to mistreat you. A Stoic sets boundaries, stands up for themselves, and takes action when necessary. But they do so without compromising their values. If someone lies to them, they do not respond with deceit. If someone insults them, they do not lower themselves to the same level. They remain in control of themselves at all times. Consider Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire yet never allowed power to corrupt him. He was surrounded by flatterers, traitors, and enemies, yet he remained just. His character was not shaped by the people around him. It was shaped by his principles. And that is the mark of true strength. The world will constantly test you. People will provoke you, challenge you, and try to pull you down to their level. But the Stoic remains firm. They ask themselves, who do I want to be? What kind of person do I respect? And they live according to that standard, regardless of what others do. Your character is the one thing that is truly yours. Do not hand it over to the whims of others. Be unshakable, be virtuous, and let the actions of others be their burden, not yours. Stoicism isn't just about reading old quotes, it's about applying them. If you start practicing these 8 don'ts daily, you'll notice a shift. You'll become less reactive, more disciplined, and ultimately, more in control of your own life. The world will still be chaotic, people will still be difficult, and challenges will still arise. But you will handle them differently. You will handle them as a Stoic. Remember, your power lies not in controlling the world, but in mastering yourself. See you in the next one. If you found this video helpful, please like and share it to spread the wisdom of Stoic philosophy. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss future videos on Stoic living and personal growth. Thank you for watching, and I wish you strength on your journey.